Majority Leader.
Mr. President, first let me begin by welcoming back our friend Leader McConnell to the Senate. It's great to have him back here in this chamber. We're all happy to see he's recovering well. I also want to welcome back our colleague from Pennsylvania and friend, Senator Fetterman. We're all glad he got the support he needed, and he's sending an important message to millions of Americans that asking for and getting help works. Now on the debt ceiling. Today's the start of a consequential work period here in Congress. But instead of getting to work in our nation's capital, House Republican leadership took a field trip to New York City. It was sort of a circus. Today's big spectacle, of course, was Speaker McCarthy's speech at the New York Stock Exchange, where he recycled the same old talking points but failed to provide anything new or anything of substance. One thing is clear from this morning's theatrics. While Democrats want to preserve America's full faith and credit, Speaker McCarthy continues to bumble our country towards default, which would cause the economy to crash, cause jobs to crater, and drastically raise costs across the board to American families. Amazingly, one of the few specifics McCarthy did present was his terrible idea to kick the can down the road for just a year and undergo this same default crisis all over again a year from now. Would anyone agree to undergo this fiasco again next year? Give me a break. I'll be blunt. If Speaker McCarthy continues in this direction, he is heading us towards default. You know what will avoid default? Republicans working with Democrats to avert this crisis altogether, just as we did under Donald Trump. Speaker McCarthy in his speech invoked President Reagan, but Ronald Reagan was never reckless like McCarthy is being. In fact, it was Reagan who said, quote, "Debt ceiling brinksmanship threatens the holders of government bonds and those who rely on Social Security and veterans' benefits. The United States has a special responsibility to itself and the world to meet its obligations." And despite the Speaker's stated concerns about costs, nothing would do more to raise costs for American families than default. Now, for months, Speaker McCarthy has insisted on cuts in exchange for avoiding a default. We all know the best way to avoid default is no brinksmanship, no hostage-taking. Do it clean, the way President Trump did it twice, with Democrats and Republicans working together, and President Biden did it once, with Democrats and Republicans working together. That's the way to do this. Now, McCarthy's insisting on cuts. But to boot, he doesn't say what those cuts are. As I've said, there's previously a time and place to discuss cuts, but that's not part of this conversation. It belongs in the discussion about the budget, not as a precondition for avoiding default. Again, let me repeat that so they might hear it in the other side in the House chamber. It belongs, the discussion about cuts belongs in the discussion about budget, not as a precondition for avoiding default. The solution here is straightforward. Republicans should work with Democrats in good faith to avoid default altogether, just as we did with Donald Trump. No blackmail. No brinksmanship, no default. Speaker McCarthy, show us your plan. President Biden and I are happy to meet with Speaker McCarthy when he has something to talk about, a plan. Most Democratic leaders are, but we need to see his plan first so we can start from there and work to avoid catastrophic default altogether. If we go to meetings without the Speaker McCarthy having a plan, what are we going to do? Talk about the furniture, the weather? Finally, Speaker McCarthy today quoted a great Yankee, the great Babe Ruth, saying, quote, "You just can't beat the person who never gives up." Well, first, Speaker McCarthy, don't quote a Yankee to me in New York City. Second, the Speaker's right, he's never given up. However, that's only because he's never started. No plan, no progress, no persistence. So to make sense of today's speech, I think it was another great Yankee, the great number 8, Yogi Berra, who hit the nail on the head. "It's deja vu all over again," Yogi said. It applies exactly to Speaker McCarthy's speech today. No plan, no progress, nothing. Speaker McCarthy, show us a plan, work to deliver for the American people, In sum, sum it all up, Speaker McCarthy plays a risky and dangerous game when insisting on imposing severe cuts, which would hurt the American people and threaten our economy before we avoid default. In addition, to boot, he can't even reveal what those cuts are. If Speaker McCarthy, this is a sad truth, but it's a truth. If Speaker McCarthy doesn't change his course, he could well take this country over the cliff to default for the first time. On Republican extremism, at the start of the year, I warned that Republicans in Congress faced a critical choice: abandon MAGA extremism for the good of the country or double down on the road to radicalism. 4 months later, too many Republicans have made the choice clear. Instead of coming to the middle, they have sprinted to the extreme. Instead of abandoning MAGA, too many Republicans have doubled down. Especially, look at the last few weeks. Look no further than what happened last week in Florida, where the Republican governor signed one of the most extreme anti-choice bills in the entire country, a near total ban on abortion after 6 weeks. Let's not kid ourselves. A 6-week ban is practically a total ban. Many women don't even know they're pregnant by 6 weeks. Most Floridians fiercely oppose such a draconian provision, one that will endanger not only millions of women in Florida, but tens of millions of women across the entire South, who tragically have fewer and fewer options for accessing reproductive care. And lest anyone think Republicans oppose abortion because of states' rights, oh no. The decision by a federal judge in Texas issuing a nationwide suspension of mifepristone should make it clear what this is about. A national ban on abortion. That's where the Republicans seem to be. And Republicans seem to be caught. These 2 weeks made it clear, in a self-destructive dynamic. The more that Americans reject their extreme views at the ballot box, the more these MAGA Republicans seem to double down. We're seeing this played out on choice, but we're seeing it played out on gun safety. Let me be clear. Most Americans support some common sense gun safety. Parents are tired of worrying about whether their kids are safe at school. But when tragedy struck at a school in Nashville, Tennessee, Republicans reacted not by voting new gun safety laws, but instead by expelling 2 representatives of color who dared commit the sin of speaking out against the inaction. That's the antithesis of democracy, the road to outright autocracy. Even today, Republican extremism was on full display in New York City. Today, the Republican House Judiciary Chairman held what he claimed was a field hearing about public safety. But to date, Chairman Jordan and his colleagues have refused to denounce President Trump's call to defund the FBI and the DOJ. Defunding the FBI is truly unhinged, and every single member of the House and Senate, Democrat and Republican alike, should unequivocally condemn former President Trump for pushing this idea. Very soon, the members of this chamber will have a chance to go on record and denounce the former president's call to cut funding to our federal law enforcement. I hope everyone in the chamber does the right thing. The FBI, many of them risk their lives to protect us from drugs, from guns, from terrorism. Defund it just because President Trump, in a self-serving moment, said so? Where are our Republican friends? Or are they just moving so far to the right they can't even reject something as clear as this? So, as I said moments ago, Republicans are caught in a self-destructive dynamic. The more that Americans reject their extreme views at the ballot box, the more they seem to double down. If they continue down this road, not only will our country suffer, but the GOP themselves will suffer as Americans keep rejecting them at the ballot box. If they continue down this road, our country will suffer, so will the GOP as Americans keep rejecting them at the ballot box. Finally, on upcoming Senate business, today the Senate gavels back in for the start of a busy week, a very busy work period. There's so much we must do on lowering costs and improving lives of American families, strengthening health care, lowering prescription drug costs, preserving America's competitiveness, and protecting America's fundamental rights. We will get to work on these issues, particularly starting off with the fire bill, which will come before us this week. I yield the floor.